And this is actually the transition to our resource sharing theme section now. So our first presenter is Charlotte Johnson, who is research collection coordinator at the University of Pittsburgh. And Charlotte will be framing this section by discussing the relationship between shared print and resource sharing. Thank you, Charlotte.
Thanks, Matthew. All righty. Oh, goodness. All right, can you see that okay?
Just perfect. Thank you, Charlotte.
Fantastic. All right. Hi, everyone. As he said, my name is Charlotte M. Johnson. I am with the University of Pittsburgh, and I've been invited here today to talk about a panel that I moderated at the Charleston conference in November 2021 called Next Steps in Shared Collection Management. This panel came about through the efforts of the Communications and Advocacy Joint Working Group between Rosemont Shared Print Alliance and the Partnership for Shared Book Collections. And on this panel were Boaz Nadev-Manes from Lehigh University, Linda Wobe from SCELC, and Heather McMullen from Queen's University. And I think I saw all three of you here today, so hello again. These are the questions that I posed to the panelists. I'm not going to read them aloud because it's a lot of text, but I'll let you look at that. Shared print is becoming much more than a method for intelligent collections management. It is changing the dependencies that libraries have on one another, and collections shared among groups of libraries are creating the need for new and changing workflows. This panel session examined some of these workflows and associated challenges, particularly those related to resource sharing. So, shared print has been rapidly evolving in the past several years, due in part to effectively shrinking collections budgets and the increasing demands on library spaces for uses other than holding resources. It's also been identified as means of furthering library goals in access, preservation, and digitization. Shared print is also a logical extension of resource sharing services. So with this panel, we had hoped to point out areas where resource sharing and shared print programs intersect and how they can work together to further both of their goals, which are actually probably the same goals. We also directly advocated for more participation in shared print programs by resource sharing practitioners, mostly because resource sharing staff already track the lending statistics of materials, yearly shipping costs, and other collection use statistics, all of which are really valuable to shared print programs and gauging the success of those programs. And shared print can only benefit from being more aware of resource sharing daily operations too, as things scale up, because the resource sharing staff are the ones who are actually enacting the shared print activities. And resource sharing networks also have these established standards and best practices that shared print can learn from, having been around for much longer. So resource sharing staff can and should add their voices to the conversations that shared print is having with vendors and amongst the different shared print groups. And I think supervisors should encourage and empower their staff to do so. There are also, there are already shared print groups that interact with the resource sharing world, such as PAN, where we are now, the Partnership for Shared Book Collections, Rosemont, and the recent collaboration between the California Digital Library, Center for Research Libraries, and HathiTrust, which we heard about earlier this morning. So, what's the future of shared print and resource sharing looking like? Our panelists identified digital lending as one of the spaces to watch for new developments in shared print and resource sharing. Controlled digital lending, the other CDL, is obviously a big focus area, but we can also, come up with other methods of doing that we haven't even thought of yet, within copyright, obviously. But right now it looks like the implementation of CDL relies on available vendor technology. And vendors are developing software along with other library-led initiatives like Project ReShare, which we'll hear from shortly. Also, as issues like the need for reporting, analytics, and good metadata rise to the surface of shared print discussions with vendors and programs, it is the panelists' hope that they'll see more developments in the vendor end for flagging shared print retention commitments in ways that are open and visible to other libraries. Because having access to actionable statistics and interoperable systems of both the home library and other libraries within that consortium is the best way to get the fullest possible picture in resource sharing and collection data analysis. This is especially true if programs pursue intentional shared collection development. This does raise other questions of ownership versus access, but that's not what we're talking about today. We're also hoping to see more vendor development of automated lending and smart fulfillment in the interlibrary loan spaces. This could be a really good opportunity for shared print programs to take advantage of, since user expectations we see for resource sharing also apply to shared print, because most patrons aren't going to know the difference between whether they received a book from interlibrary loan or U-Borrow, Easy Borrow, whatever you may brand it as shared print. A good summary of the future of shared print is new software development. Now some challenges. So currently one of the biggest roadblocks to the ideas that I talked about in the last slide is the legal uncertainty around copyright, especially since COVID required libraries to test out new ways of giving patrons access to our materials. We've been forced to reckon with these ideas in physical space instead of just thinking about it. Our panelists underscored the importance of libraries asserting their rights to lend materials regardless of format and not letting other entities decide what that means without our input. Infrastructure is also a concern as we scale up. Libraries need policies, interoperable standards, and the infrastructure to achieve the next level of resource sharing at scale within the framework of shared print. So in other words, libraries are still figuring out how to fit increased shared print activity into their work. COVID-19 has revealed or even exacerbated the need to be flexible and timely in the delivery of information, regardless of location. So our panelists suggested that perhaps instead of building on what we already have, which was built in a completely different technological environment, we take shared print and resource sharing and the current technological landscape and its potential to completely rethink our services. We can have conversations like the panel we had, more collaboration with vendors and providers, and we can also start experimenting and developing our own pilot projects. Another challenge is technology. Programs need a way to gather statistics about the lending and borrowing of materials with retention commitments. We need to understand the volume of resource sharing activity and we need to be able to assess the value and necessity and the impact of shared print programs in general. So that tool that Allison and Heather shared earlier, that would also be something that would be very, very helpful. For a CDL-like service to work at scale, we also need to understand the total number of owned print copies at play, preferably on a global scale, because shared print is most effective on a large scale. We're only now just seeing development of that structure. WorldCat, for example, you can see your own retention commitments, but at the time of the panel, you couldn't see anyone else's in your consortium. And that's kind of a problem because going to all the libraries in your consortium and asking them for their shared print retention commitments is rather time consuming. Also, we need libraries and shared print programs need to decide together where they want shared print to go, and which commercial partners are adequate to pursue our goals with. Libraries may need to take a more active entrepreneurial role, developing and experimenting with potential solutions. So to summarize, shared print is lacking analytics, true interoperability between software and systems, codified shared print collection policies, and solidified goals. All right, and in conclusion, our panel members are very excited about the potential for future integration and partnership between shared print and resource sharing. We're already making progress with advancing standards and interoperability in shared print, but what we really need is a more unified front on the library's end. Knowing what we want out of shared print, we really have the power to shape where this is going, and making sure that as many voices as necessary are at the table, both from the resource sharing and the shared print side of things. So that's where I'll leave y'all for today. This presentation will be expanded in the proceedings of the Charleston Conference 2021, so keep your eyes peeled for that for more details. Thanks so much.
Excellent, thank you, Charlotte. Are there any questions at all for Charlotte? We don't have any currently in the chat or in the document, but again, feel free to submit them in the chat now between the two presentations. So not seeing any questions coming in, Charlotte. So thank you again for your presentation. And if anything does occur to you and you want to ask Charlotte, feel free to add it into the chat as we go along for the rest of the panel. Thank you very much. So our next presenters, I would like to welcome are Boaz Nadev-Manes, who is University Librarian at Lehigh University, Pam Jones, the Executive Director of the Connect New York Library Consortium, and Kristina Rose, who is Associate Dean for Collections and Content Strategy at New York University Libraries. Boaz, Pam, and Kristina will be discussing their experiences of using the ReShare tool in support of resource sharing and shared print. So thank you to all three presenters.
Okay, I am going to share my screen. Slideshow. Matthew, can you see it?
Just perfect. Thank you, Pam.
Okay, great. I'm Pam Jones. As Matthew said, I'm the Executive Director of Connect New York. We are a small academic consortium in New York State. All of it's 12 private libraries right now are participating. And we do have a shared print trust with 12 libraries. Not all of them are still members, but they are all still part of our shared print trust. Okay, let's see if I get this to move. Oh, too fast. So those are our names, as Matthew already said. So what is ReShare? For any of you who have not heard of it before or are new to it, it is pretty much new, very new, open source software-based resource sharing product that creates a shared index from which you may request, and it brings in all of your things into this index. People can request from them from a discovery layer. It is an inclusive community-owned ecosystem. We've got libraries, consortia, software developers, open source advocates included. We have recently added many more consortia to the membership, which is very exciting. And the great thing, I think, is that it works well with every system. So far, we've got, I don't even know how many different systems working with it. And we find that it's been pretty easy to get it going because it's standard-based protocols. Right now, we are live with returnables, as is PELSI. And the roadmap does include non-returnables and CDL support, which we'll be working on over the next year or so. And Shared Index does really support and enable collective collections rather than providing you all snippets of different collections, pulls them all together collectively. And we do, our shared print commitments are discoverable within the index. You search for CNY-SPA and a whole bunch of them come up, hundreds of thousands. And there is the URL if you want more information. So Connect New York, why did we choose ReShare? Why did we do it now? And how's it going? So I thought those would kind of be maybe things of interest to folks. Connect New York had been using innovative interfaces InReach product for 20 years. And as we grew and shrank over the years, it became more difficult to add on non-III libraries. It was a clunky interface for many people. They weren't happy with it. The board wasn't happy with it. And we were looking for something different, something that we could have a lot more say in how the product is developed. We wanted that agency. We were looking for something that was inclusive of all types of systems easily. And so we also were hoping for some reduction in costs, which we did get. Why now? Like I said, we were ready for a change. And so when Index Data became the certified service provider, shortly after Palsy signed on to be implemented, we did the same. We went live on September 1st last year. It's going well. That first couple of months was challenging. It wasn't awful. It was just challenging because as we use a system that's brand new, Palsy folks and Connect New York folks were finding things that needed to be changed, tweaked, fixed, and they have been. At this point, we're at a really good stage of using it. Folks seem to be very comfortable with it. It does totally support our resource sharing and gives people the view of our collective collection. Okay, I'm going to pass it on now to, went too far. Okay, Boaz.
Hi, everybody. I'm Boaz. I'm the University Librarian in Lehigh University. Thank you, Pam, for explaining to us how Connect New York adopted policy ReShare. And, you know, I'm here to explain a little bit about our policy work and then go to why Lehigh has done it and then talk a little bit about potential. So policy is the trusted and preferred partnership for academic library collaboration and innovation. That's a fairly new name. It used to be very focused on the PA side of the acronym, and now we're thinking about partnership. And if you're looking at those four circles that are about, you know, what we're all about, you can see that innovation support is at the bottom and as a foundation of everything we do. So projects like Project ReShare that was endorsed by the board as early as 2018 was already kind of worked on in 2017 by a small group of librarians in policy, thinking about the future of ReShare, thinking about how to, you know, kind of think about consolidation of systems and ownership of data across our library infrastructure, and thinking that maybe ReShare can provide a great solution. So the policy has, in August 2021, adopted ReShare as a group. We have 53 libraries that are now using it out of 74 libraries in policy. And the next ones will be folded in the next 6 to 12 months, I believe. Can you go forward?
I can try. There we go.
Here we go. So a little bit about Lehigh's interest. So you see some quotes from our folks and me. There is a history of innovation and open source work in Lehigh. We kind of believe we're at the tip of the spear. We have lots of staff working on those open source initiatives, actually almost everybody at this point in the libraries. It's a merged organization with technology and security, and we have an advantage kind of thinking about how to think about infrastructure at scale because we are working together on many different things. So you can see a little bit our thinking. You know, it's good because it's aligned with our mission, aligned with our vision around what libraries do nowadays. And also we're thinking about metadata interoperability, standards, and all those good things that can make us work well. So we've implemented it just in August, I believe. And since then, I think in Lehigh, we had like around 700 requests, according to Mark, that is on the SME group, the subject matter expertise group that is looking into the interoperability and looking into how to apply ReShare locally. You know, like kind of, you know, thinking about how to grow from here. And I'll go to the next slide now. Thank you. Okay, so this is kind of my favorite thing to do, is to not to panic. So thinking about, you know, like the future of our work in libraries, and we have excellent library leadership around the table here. So, consortia leadership that is so significant this time, thinking about, the way we reflect on what's going on with COVID and our expertise and resources that are diminishing in some ways, and how to work collaboratively. So ReShare is providing some of this advantage because we can communicate with each other. We use standards that are allowing us to grow and kind of fit our next generation needs into infrastructures. And here are some ideas on, ways by which we can kind of, like track what we may want to do. We can work if it all work together. If shared collections and shared print can work with Project ReShare or with other type of interoperable systems, we can think about prospective collection development. The belonging collection is a name I'm using to kind of frame again the floating collection. So instead of it being floating somewhere in the air, maybe it's the collection that belongs to our own users right now. So how do we fit a collection that we own to what users need right now? And that can mean many different things and may change quite often. Event-driven acquisitions, if we have an event in the library, what is it that we need to supplement that event? Maybe we need it right now. So again, there is this interest in quick turnaround, in changing and flexibility of systems to address what is right now a need to kind of sustain programs and sustain communities around us. Connection driven, so instead of it being preservation for everything, maybe it is about preserving certain relationships, certain connections. Inverse collecting and discovery, what is not being searched, what is not being looked in vendor provided services is significant for research going forward. So thinking about what is a gap, what is it that we may be looking for. Data-driven deselection, you can imagine what that may mean. Reverse acquisitions, what is not being acquired by the whole community, what is it that we want to maybe automate and acquire as a collaborative. And direct to shared print, so maybe there are things that we don't want to even go through the local libraries and just send items to shared print collaborations where we can collect things more at scale. So this is kind of a little bit of kind of maybe next gen. The most important thing here is accountable and actionable work. So items like a calculator or a machine we own is easier to address our goals and needs going forward. So that's a governance model that ReShare is providing at this point, and we're very happy and excited to help that grow. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kristina Rose. I was already introduced. I'm going to take a little different tack with this. I'm going to talk about the work that the Retrospective Collections Working Group within PALCI has done. I'm a member of that. The members that are listed there on the screen that we've done to sort of define what is a healthy sharing ecosystem. And the reason we did this work is when we joined ReShare, there's so much excitement about how to use that shared index and what are the possibilities now. And we started surveying members about projects involving print and that collective collection. And we got lots of ideas, but we kept coming back to this notion of we need to ensure there's a healthy sharing ecosystem. And what we're doing we're not a shared print consortia, but we need to support the collective collection in some manner. So anyway, this is sort of a foundational kind of piece. It's a draft. I welcome your comments on it about what is a healthy sharing ecosystem. Many of our PALCI libraries are members of shared print programs, East and Hati Trust. If we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so when we were thinking about this, we came up with basically pillars, a pillar approach, so there are 5 pillars that kind of define what a healthy sharing ecosystem is, or sort of holding up the house. And the first one is the system is based on inclusion. And Boaz and Pam have talked a little bit about what that means in ReShare, but again, to review interoperability of systems and openness of data and an ability to share data among members, and the tool allows you to do that. And the tool is based on the use of standards. I'd also add one other, which is the services and program of the consortia support a diverse set of institutions being able to participate. PALCI libraries are public, they're private, they're small, they're large, they're well-funded and not so well-funded. And there needs to be a way for all of those libraries to participate. The next two pillars are really shared, and they've been kind of throughout everybody's presentation today. And it is that the system is based on access, and that's access for current users, and access to the collection would be timely, and there'd be effective delivery systems. And then the other side of that is that access is balanced with the needs, with the idea of the stewardship of the collective collection that's available for future users. And that's kind of been the fundamental of what we've all been talking about today. And then the final, another pillar is trust. And this is trust for at all levels in the system. First of all, that our users trust that they can get the materials they need for teaching, learning, and research, even if they don't quite know what the name of the service is. A second aspect of trust is that our staff trust the other actors in the system to do their best to fulfill requests, care for materials as if they were their own, and share the load. And in PALCI, sometimes good citizenship means that members do things for the good of the whole, even if they don't always benefit equally or at the same time or in the same way. I know that is especially true for NYU. We borrow a lot from PALCI member libraries, and we try to contribute. Sometimes we have to contribute to other initiatives in PALCI, not exactly resource sharing. And then for the final bit of trust is that we trust our consortium leaders, the technology providers, the developers, and subject matter experts to effectively advocate and work for our collective needs. And we trust in the future with this system, that the system remains open and inclusive and continues to evolve with our libraries and users. And the last pillar is a very PALCI type pillar. We are grounded in pragmatism. And going back to that diverse set of libraries, access, we focus on access, and we need to do doable and inclusive programs that allow all of our libraries to provide excellent services to their users in sustainable ways. So if we can go to the next slide. So how does this actually play out in terms of, Easy Borrow? Easy Borrow is the name of PALCI's expedited interlibrary loan service. It's powered by ReShare. It is sort of the cornerstone of our healthy sharing ecosystem. And I want to just talk a little bit about some of the characteristics of Easy Borrow, because in my opinion, with a healthy sharing system, the devil's in the details. And so the first detail here is that there's excellent user experience. The interface that users use to request things is intuitive. The service is reliable, and that is kind of two things. There's a high fill rate in terms of being able to fulfill requests that users need. And then it's absolutely essential, this 3 to 5 day turnaround time. Users can count on getting materials in a reasonable time frame. And that means that students can get materials for their courses, researchers can get materials for a project they're working on and they need it right away next week. And then another aspect, and this has come up a few years ago in PALCI, but it's really important, is that the loan length matches the reality for our students and faculty. So moving towards things like a full semester loan. These are really picky, weedy things, but they're absolutely essential in building that pillar of trust. Another part of the pillar, a part of the kind of details here is that the ecosystem is sustainable for libraries. And a couple ways that that's expressed in Easy Borrow is there's predictable shipping costs. So as a library director, I can have a sense of what Easy Borrow is going to cost me year in, year out, if based on our volume. For our library staff, it means that there's unmediated processing, that this isn't excessively hard to participate in, and that the workflows are intuitive and efficient. And then finally, overall, we're able to integrate this service with all the other tools we use for resource sharing. And that goes back to the pillar of inclusion and working on standards-based systems. The other way that this healthy ecosystem is expressed in Easy Borrow is there's an active practitioners community. And Pam mentioned this a little bit, and we have practitioners who are invested in working together and learning from each other. And they're also willing to complain and test and participate in making the service better. I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't see some email on the Easy Borrow list about something going on. And not necessarily problems, but sharing information and just kind of working out and learning together. It's a really impressive group, and it's one of the most lovely conferences you'll ever go to if you get the chance. And then the other part of this is a commitment to growth. And that really is at this sort of institutional level in PELSI, that PELSI is committed to exploring alternative delivery mechanisms such as controlled digital lending, or considering sharing formats other than books, and some of the things that Boaz talked about as well. So anyway, that's kind of our draft. I don't have much more. If there's questions, I do plan to be at the water cooler on Monday. So if you want to send me feedback, the retrospective group is looking for feedback. So we can make this even stronger. Thank you all.
Thank you. I can see some questions being typed into the document right at the moment, but there is one comment that I can see in there already, and that is, would love to hear more about the data analysis possibilities, both current capabilities and envisaged development. And then some more specific questions that are coming in now are, Kristina, can you say more about what stewardship looks like in the ecosystem? Is it retention agreements, ongoing collecting agreements?
So, you know, when I said this is a foundational document, it really is. We haven't defined that yet. One of the things that we don't want to, I think what we would like is visibility of those print retention commitments in the index, so we're able to do data analysis and think about that. But in terms of will we become a shared print program? Probably not. I mean, PELSI's doing something else. But so I think that the projects are still emerging, but this is more like foundational and helping us frame that vision later. I don't know if Boaz has anything he wants to add.
I can add that we're working. I think PELSI is looking into open data sharing platforms that will add, you know, a facet to the capabilities right now, and thinking about you know, that calculator. So lots of information that we own locally can be shared in the consortia level. And I think that that's what Jill Morris, the director of PELSI, kind of identifies as an advantage. As a consortia, she has, or staff has, access to activities all across the consortia in a way that is unprecedented, I think. So thinking, you know, like about ways by which consortia to consortia or inter-consortia work with East and others, shared print kind of hubs of data is really gonna be enabling us to do more prospective work that is mission driven. So this is a space that we're looking into, because that index is very significant for us to kind of move forward.
Yeah, and one of the things that Jill and I have very much on our roadmap as soon as possible is to connect the two systems, PELSI's and Connect New York's, and that will provide us an even greater opportunity for resource sharing, for relying on each other, for seeing what's out there, being able to use that shared index to do that kind of analysis will be really interesting.
Thank you, all three presenters. There is another question in the chat, but for this in the document side, but for the sake of time, I'm actually going to just move things along, and I'm going to pass it on to Kristina to answer. But we do need to move on now to our next presenter. So thank you, all three of you, for your presentation. So our next presenter is Mark Paris, who is Associate University Librarian for Scholarly Resources and Discovery at Brandeis University. Mark is going to be discussing a vision for vendor-neutral resource sharing. Take it away, Mark.
Thank you. It's great to be here today. Let me just share my screen. Is everyone seeing my
we're seeing it, but we're seeing the notes on the
presenter mode?
Yeah, the presenter mode. Yeah, thank you. That was the word I was looking for. There we go.
Did it switched? Okay, perfect.
It switched. Thank you very much.
Thanks. So thanks all for the opportunity to present here today. I really appreciate this. Yeah, I do want to speak a little bit about vendor neutral resource sharing, really kind of leveraging standards, specifically the ISO protocol, to connect systems and build strategic partnerships. With that, the agenda really is to look at the context at Brandeis, because we have our own kind of unique context, give a very brief introduction to ISO, and then really a call to action. So the context at Brandeis. We did take a vendor approach in terms of our resource sharing system. It made sense for us at Brandeis for a number of reasons that I'll talk a little bit about. But using a vendor for resource sharing certainly does not mean that we don't want vendor neutral approaches of working with other organizations or other consortia, because that is deeply important. We signed on as a Rapido early adopter, being the Ex Libris' new resource sharing platform, in October of 2020. We had a user study in 2019 looking specifically at interlibrary loan. And what that user study highlighted, which was not at all surprising to me, that our users within our community had a great deal of difficulty because they got bounced. If they knew about the existence of interlibrary loan, which was questionable to start with, then they had a great deal of difficulty with understanding that they got bounced around to different platforms. And, you know, it was not a terribly smooth user experience for folks. And so we ended up adopting Rapido largely because we wanted to address that user experience issue. We wanted the discovery to delivery pipeline to be absolutely seamless. And so our adoption of Rapido really did address that. It was also administratively, with a relatively small and constrained budget and a small system staff, we had fewer platforms to administer on the system side of things. We also wanted to achieve strategic collections and analytics. So we have a strong analytics platform built into our library services platform. Seeing things tied into that more directly really helped us unify the analytics. And so that is developing along quite nicely. And it brought about cost savings. A little bit more on this, but essentially even had we not taken the more dramatic steps that we had to take due to budget cuts, this approach would have been a mild cost reduction, but as it turned out, it ended up being a pretty significant cost reduction. So the implementation started in January 2021. This is where that big cost reduction comes into place. So fiscal year 23, we had budget cuts. Actually, that should be fiscal year 22. Budget cuts for this fiscal year. Significant budget cuts had to be made. We found out about January 2021. Or no, it was, yes, fiscal year 23. We found out that those budget cuts were going to be coming down, and we needed to make a pretty dramatic cut in what we were going to spend for the following fiscal year. And so the way I managed those cuts, because my portfolio of services, just for full disclosure, so I have interlibrary loan, acquisitions and discovery, so all of our collections activities, e-resources, and library systems, all are in my portfolio. So the biggest area to cut the budget-wise would be collections. I did not want to cut deeply into collections, and so I looked at services infrastructure that could be cut without sacrificing collections. And so WorldShare ILL was the place to go for that larger sum of money that could have been cut out. And of course, some collections were in the mix. It wasn't a no hit to collections. There was a significant hit there, but every dollar that I could have prevented from being cut there, I was committed to do. So we ended up cutting WorldShare ILL in the process, and so we did save a good amount of money. There was a concurrent project really to upgrade our discovery environment as well. So we moved to Primo VE, which was required for Rapido. And so the whole process of rolling this out was really Primo VE we released into production on June 7th. We moved our entire scan on demand or digitization infrastructure out of Iliad and to the ALMA digitization workflow on June 14th. We started processing lending in Rapido as well on June 14th. We went live with borrowing on June 21st and had this short cutover before we lost Iliad and OCLC WorldShare ILL totally. So we had that little window to iron out issues. And then July 1, Iliad and WorldShare ILL are gone, and we are fully live on Rapido. So where ISO plays into this, really the Rapido ecosystem, so it is based heavily on Rapid ILL, which is a very good infrastructure that allows particularly digital content to be shared very quickly. Rapido addresses physical infrastructure, and so allows borrowing and lending very easily with other Rapido libraries. And then the way we integrate with non-Rapido libraries is really through the ISO protocol. So ISO 10161, if you really wanted to go look it up, I'm giving you the numbers. It's also known as ISO ILL. It's been around since the 90s. So it's had a long history. It was used pretty significantly, as I understand it, by the RLG libraries back in the day. It seems to have been a little bit lost to time since, at least in the United States. It is heavily used internationally, and I can talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. But it's been around for quite some time. It's not a really it's more robust than other types of connections that one could make to your circulation system with resource sharing systems, but it's not tremendously robust. It's a little dated. It's been since surpassed by ISO 18626, which is really the next generation standard, with the potential to carry far more data and be leveraged for things like controlled digital lending, which I think is a huge bit of potential that makes ISO a very appealing approach to connecting resource sharing systems. Most resource sharing systems support ISO requesting, though very few people, especially in the United States, are truly aware of it. And it involves, basically it just involves a system passing a file back and forth. And that's how they communicate. You know, when we send a request out to another library with ISO, it sends a file with all that request data. It shows up in their system that they use. Doesn't have to be the same as ours. And when they update it, they say that they'll supply it, or they update it as shipped. They end up passing a file back to us. Our status is update based on that file. So it's really just passing files back and forth. While we were working to implement Rapido, I worked pretty extensively with Ex Libris to help them while we still had Iliad live and running, helped them understand, especially the Iliad process of consuming and passing an ISO file. And so we diligently worked, and by the time we went live and decommissioned Iliad, essentially Ex Libris had ISO functionality working successfully between either ALMA or Rapido, as both have resource sharing functionality, so that a Rapido or an ALMA library could pass ISO files back and forth with ILLiad libraries, which is huge, since ILLiad is still the largest resource sharing system in use in the United States. So in doing so, we really made it possible to do true interoperable lending and borrowing. So we now have ISO connections to ILLiad with CRL, very excited about that. Middlebury College, Dickinson College, and Wellesley College. We are working with Williams College and the University of Connecticut. We also have ISO connections, not to ILLiad, but to essentially about 20 of the SUNY institutions, and we're working on setting up the ISO connections to the Ontario Council of University Libraries. So in Canada, where ISO is quite common, we're integrating with ReShare. So very excited to be getting that in play. So really what I wanted to turn this into is a call to action, given that we have these interoperable options in front of us. So resource sharing is among the most complex services offered by libraries, and I believe it is deeply strategic. It is deeply strategic for purposes of collection building, for purposes of the shared print initiatives. Brandeis is proudly a member of EAST and proudly a member of HATI. It's also expensive, where the majority of resource sharing in the United States tends to happen through one vendor. Leveraging a vendor neutral approach such as ISO, and especially where if we're not thinking about it in terms of trying to do all resource sharing in this method, but even if we were to transition our closest consortial partnerships, our most strategic partners. So for us at Brandeis University, a secular Jewish university where we have tremendous Near East and Judaic studies programs. So we have ISO working between us and the University of Haifa. That's another one of our partnerships. So a library in Israel. These are deeply strategic. So if we even took and broke down our closest partnerships and started thinking, well, let's leverage ISO today between those partnerships, that would be a tremendous path toward being less dependent on OCLC. And so having fewer transactions pass through that channel. So that's part of my call to action. Another part of my call to action is really assess what is your vision for resource sharing and how are you addressing resource constraints? And as you think about that question and think about that answer, will you join me in advocating for a vendor neutral approach? So one way to begin doing this is to install ISO on your environment. If you have ILLiad, it is not installed out of the box. You do have to either request through the hosted platform if you use a hosted environment. If it's locally hosted, your systems team would have to install it. It is not a difficult install, but there are a growing number of us that are doing this. Let others know that this option exists. Knowledge, I found that very few people know and understand fully that these options exist, and work with vendors to enhance ISO 18626. This really is a huge opportunity to support CDL. I do see CDL as very significant in terms of where we're going with both access to our general collections. We are doing a limited local CDL program through our Discovery platform. It works quite nicely, and we're excited to look at opportunities to do consortial CDL. And I do think ISO 18626 will play a huge role in that. It also ties in with these shared print initiatives. I think CDL is a very strategic piece of shared print. I'd also like to advocate, and I've spoken with both Ex Libris and Index Data, one of the key organizations behind Project ReShare, about enhancing ISO 18626 to pass debits and credits as a replacement for IFM. That's another huge opportunity. So really advocate for that kind of vendor neutral approach. So I really appreciate the time today. If there are any questions, I hope you'll join the water cooler conversation on Monday. I will be there.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mark.